Hello everyone, welcome to the Leesburg Public Library Show. My name is Tom Wilcox. I am an adult services librarian here at the library, and today I have the honor to present Dr. Harriet Masembe. She is a very distinguished English professor here at Lake Sumter College right here in Leesburg, but she has also been a visiting scholar at many distinguished schools around the United States. And she is going to present a program about African folk tales, and this program is for all ages. It's going to be Saturday, April 6th at 10 a.m. in Room A at the library, which is 100 East Main Street right here in Leesburg. And I think we'll have a very, very good program, and we're going to tell you a little bit about it today. So, Doctor, can you tell us a little something about your background?
Yes, thank you very much for inviting me to this program, and I'm looking forward to my presentation of African folktales on April 6th at 10 o'clock in the public library. I grew up in Uganda. I had my undergraduate degree in English in Uganda, my BA, and I started my master's degree doing coursework in Shakespeare and Greek classical drama. And then when I completed the coursework, I went to England, Sheffield University, to complete the same master's degree. And I wrote the dissertation there, the thesis for my master's at Sheffield University. And then after I completed my master's degree, I came to the University of Wisconsin in Madison for a PhD in African literature. And that is where I got involved with a lot of storytelling.
Okay. But, well, can you tell us a little something about the African Folk Tales program?
The program, as I designed it, was really to educate and to entertain and to supply information about Africa that is not actually usually supplied in the schools. Today, in most in most American schools, elementary and high school, they teach Africa as it was like 200 or 300 years ago. And so the kids would know about the jungle and the animals. They know about small huts. They don't see anything about the cities, the colleges, modern Africa as it is today. So I tried to combine the traditional African folk tales that would take us back 2,000 years ago, pictures and slides of modern Africa, so that my program is an introduction to Africa through stories, through songs, and through slides. And in the stories, I'm going back to the old traditional folk tale. A folk tale is a story like Cinderella, like Snow White, like Little Red Riding Hood. Well, the Africans too have their Cinderella type folk tales. And so that is the first part of the program. And then the second part of the program, I switch to modern Africa to show the American audiences life in the cities, life in the schools, and modern African society today.
All right. And now, when did you start this program?
I started it right after my PhD. When I completed my PhD at the University of Wisconsin, the natural thing was to look for a job. And I thought if I moved to Los Angeles, there are just hundreds and hundreds of universities there. I was hoping I would get a job. Well, everyone is in Los Angeles looking for jobs. So it was not easy finding a job teaching in the university. So what I decided to do, rather than just sit and wait for jobs to show up, I created my own program and started marketing a program on Africa in the elementary schools, libraries, museums, and universities. So it was through this program that I actually got introduced to California State University, Northridge. They had a Black History celebration. They invited me to do storytelling, and that is when I was invited to start teaching. But I really started it as something to occupy myself as I was looking for college jobs, and it led to a college position at Cal State Northridge.
Okay. And, well, you know, I think this is a very good question. What sort of got you interested in the art of storytelling?
It is interesting that in Africa, when I was growing up and even today, storytelling is part of the curriculum. So one by one in elementary, second, third grade, fourth grade, students come to the front of the class and they tell a story that the mother told them. So I grew up doing storytelling as part of the curriculum. We would have mathematics, history, geography, storytelling, physical education, almost on a weekly, daily basis. So I knew the stories told by my mother. I knew some stories that were read to us in the classroom, and stories that other kids told us, as one by one we told stories. So that was the beginning of the storytelling. In Africa, it is part of the elementary curriculum. But when I came to the University of Wisconsin, my PhD was in African literature, and there was a great stress on oral literature, the folktale. So I took course after course in African written literature, African oral literature, and during those classes, I used to do storytelling, and Professor Harold Shoeb was really impressed by my storytelling techniques. So he and I used to have storytelling sessions on campus and off campus. So my storytelling developed first from childhood, then as a student for my PhD, and then after the PhD, it became the first career, the first job that I created. And ever since then, I've been telling stories and presenting this program all over the United States.
Okay, that's good. But now this is, I think a lot of people are going to ask this, how do African folktales compare with European folktales, which most Americans are familiar with?
Yeah, that's a good question. People think Africa is so different from any other part of the world. So you talk about the African folktale. Well, how does that compare with the folktale from France, the Cinderella story, from the Jack and the Beanstalk? How does it compare with the American Indian folktales and folktales in all the traditional societies? We are talking about before the written literature, there was the oral literature, the folktale. At the end of the day, mother, father, and children sit by the fire, and they would tell these stories. Well, the African folktales have a lot of similar elements with folktales around the world. In the folktale, you have conflict at the beginning, a conflict between characters, between animals and people, leading to a resolution of the conflict. You have animals that speak, like Little Red Riding Hood speaking, the hare and the rabbit. You have animals that play tricks, the fox and the wolf. You have the same motifs of folktales that you have in Europe and in Africa and in Australia and in the American traditional society. You have animals that play tricks on each other. You have the monster who comes and swallows up everyone, you know, and then a giant who comes and kills the monster. You have the same folktale motifs, magic, as when you have in Cinderella, the pumpkin turning into a coach and so on. So yeah, the African folktale shares the same elements, the same themes of good and evil, life and death, light and darkness, love and marriage that exist in folktales that Americans are used to reading and hearing are also in the African folktales.
Okay, that's good. But, I was going to ask you, how did Africans use these stories in the traditional society?
Yes, in the traditional setting, in the traditional society before formal education, the stories played a major part in the life of the Africans. Number one, it was through the stories that the Africans educated their children. If they wanted them to learn what to do and what not to do, they would tell it through a story. So there are so many African folktales that are didactic, teaching a moral, teaching a lesson. Just like we have stories here that are told so children would learn, don't do this, don't do that, don't talk to strangers. So there is the educational aspect and the didactic aspect to storytelling in Africa, in the African folktales. But the storytelling are also the stories are also entertaining. It is through the story that the mother brings the children at bedtime singing the song. And I remember my mother telling these stories, and she would sing the song, and we would want to hear the same song. Kakokolo no kakokolo, kakokolo kwake ntongolio, kakokolo no kakokolo, kakokolo kwake ntongolio. Ndetera mama ndetera, agenda no mulungi talage, nange ntutte kwesirage, lumama lunyawo, jangwe nongo imba. And tongoli is this instrument that she's singing about. This is a story about a man who is playing it and a beautiful woman who follows him singing the song and saying, take your musical instrument, pretending that she wants to give it to him so she can get a chance to follow him. So these stories have entertaining songs that my mother would sing, and all over Africa there are lots of folk tales with songs that the children still enjoy. And we don't usually play instruments when we do storytelling, but I take this instrument around if I'm telling a story that talks about the instrument. So they are educational, they are entertaining, but it was also through the folk tales that the traditional African society explained the universe. Well, today we have science. We can explain why the sun shines in the morning and why the moon shines only at night. Well, the African would form a story, tell the children how come the sun shines during the day and the moon only at night. How come the rabbit has long ears? How did the zebra get those stripes? And why does the mosquito buzz in people's ears? The African animals are explained through story after story. And what is interesting is that people in West Africa would have a story explaining why the turtle has a shell that is broken up. People in Kenya have a similar story. And it's not like the Kenyans heard the story from Nigeria. These stories have existed in the traditional society, and there are some that are repeated in different parts of Africa, because Africa is a large continent, about 52 countries. And in each country, people speaking different languages. So it's not as if one country copied from another country. These stories have coexisted in African countries. So the explanation as to why and how things started, how did life begin? They would have a story to tell us how life started, why we have diseases, and so on. So they are explanatory stories, explaining the universe, explaining the beginning of life. There are some that are entertaining us. There are some that are teaching, but the folktale in Africa is just like the folktale all over the world.
Okay, and now what kind of place do these traditional folktales still have in Africa of today?
Well, today, first of all, they are still part of the school curriculum. And there are lots of books. You can see here, I brought some smaller books that would be in the elementary school. When students in the elementary schools are reading folk tales. This is the Kikuyu folk tale. This is tales from Mount Kenya. This is when the hippo was hairy, and so on. And so the smaller books are the ones that children would read in elementary schools. But then we have large anthologies. Collections of African folktales in English that are taught in universities. When I was at Wisconsin, the University of Wisconsin in Madison, we would be reading from these bigger anthologies. This is Professor Shoaib's story about the African storyteller. And African stories are also in big anthologies that include stories from Japan, from China, from England, from France. So folk tales told around the world, or one of my favorite, Joanna calls best loved folk tales around the world. And there is a section on every African country, from Europe, from China, from Japan, Korea, and so on. So they are available in anthologies. And they are available in smaller books. And then, of course, my own collection, Engerozafe. I collected these from Uganda. I published it in Luganda, so it's not in English. But I just think we need to put them in books, because otherwise the future generation
Oh, yeah.
won't have access to them. We've been hearing them from mother to son and mother to daughter. Well, a time is coming when people are watching TV and they are not listening to stories, so we need to have them in books and on videotapes and DVD, because in Africa a lot of kids are now watching DVDs and
Right.
playing video games and so on.
Oh yeah, this would be a good time to tell everyone that the Leesburg Public Library has a lot of books on African and folk tales from all around the world. So if you go to Folklores in the 398s, and we'll be glad to show you where they are, you can learn more about this. But anyway, when you present these stories to American audiences, do you tailor them to the age range?
Well, that's an interesting question, because the question assumes there is a major difference between the children listening to the stories and the adult audience. What I have found, whether I am in the elementary schools in California, in Pennsylvania, or whether I am in big institutions like Harvard University, Boston University, here at Lake Sumter, you begin a story, you catch their attention. The adults love the stories as much as the children. Now, what I do, though, to keep the children with me, I take my drums. They love the drums. Okay, this would be the double drum.
Okay.
So you teach them how to play it.
That's great.
And you say, when I raise my hand, you stop, and we start together. My hand goes up, we stop. So as I tell the story, some of the children are playing the drums, others are clapping. If there is a song, I teach the song, and they sing with me. If I have a story that has a song that is easy, I teach Selani, Selani, Namsisi Lombi, Selani, Selani, Namsisi Lombi, and they clap.
Very good.
And then we start singing, Selani, Selani, Namsisi Lombe, Selani, Selani, Namsisi Lombe.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, so the children and the adults, they love the same thing. They also respond to and laugh at the same things. The stories that really capture their attention and make them feel, I want to hear more, are those that tell them how things started. This is why we have this, and so on. Explanatory tales are very popular, both in young and adult audiences.
Okay, so anyway, I was going to ask you, where are some of the places you presented this program?
I think in the United States it would be easier to list the states where I have not presented the program than to make a list of where I have presented the program, because while I started in Wisconsin, I moved to California, and everywhere I've been, I've done storytelling. In Los Angeles in 1984, I was part of the Olympics Arts Festival.
Okay.
And this is where the LA Times reporter came, wrote a very big story about me in the LA Times, and then from that time on, several newspapers in Boston, the Boston Globe, the Christian Science Monitor. I've presented these stories all over the United States, Virginia, Georgia, here in Florida. In Europe, I have presented these stories every time I go to a conference. I belong to an organization called Masembe, the Society for Multi-Ethnic Literature and Studies, Europe and America. And we have a conference every 2 years in a different European country. Okay. And several times I have done storytelling there, in France, in Germany. I've been to Denmark. I've been to almost every European country. I haven't been to Russia. I have not been to some of the Eastern European countries, but I've been all over Europe. And I have presented widely in schools, in colleges, in elementary, in high school.
Okay, that's good. But, okay, well, this is a very important question because it's going to come up. What kind of response do you usually get from your audiences?
To be honest with you, they love the stories, But what most Americans say when they see the pictures of Africa that I present, because remember the second part of the program is presenting pictures of African schools and colleges and cities, they say, I did not know Africa has cities as big as Johannesburg. I did not realize they have television, they have cars. They are really opening their eyes to modern Africa. And while I know they like the stories, I think they come out away from my program. How about the myth we've heard that Africa is all a jungle? That there is no civilization, that it has nothing in common with the United States, and they see these swimming pools, people playing the same games and so on, the theaters and so on. Modern Africa is just like any other modern city.
Yeah.
And that is what they take out of the program. Yes, there is the traditional story, still told in Africa today, just like here. We have 3 little pigs in schools. But then there is a side of Africa that most Americans have not been exposed to. And that is what my program brings to the audiences.
Okay, and okay, well, I think you sort of answered this, because I was going to ask, what do you think the audience gets out of the program? But I think you pretty much answered that. So anyway, in your biography, you wrote several plays. Can you tell us a little bit about them?
Yes, I've been fortunate enough to be commissioned to write for the stage. The very first commission I had was actually to write a storyline for a movie. A company in Washington, D.C., development for self-reliance, it's called DRS, commissioned me to write a storyline for a movie on teenage pregnancy in Africa. Okay. I wrote the storyline. They liked it. They went to Africa. If you want to do a good film in Africa, you go to Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe is the Hollywood of Africa. So they filmed it in Africa with African students acting the movie. The movie is called Consequences, and it's been translated into French, Swahili, and several other languages. And it's played on television all over Africa. That was my first script, a storyline for the movie, Consequences. But then after that, the Museum of Science in Boston had a big exhibition on Kenya. And they wanted me to write a short play that would be acted as part of the exhibit. And so I wrote a story about an African artist. It is called The Master Artist. That was my first staged play in the Museum of Science in Boston. And then I was also commissioned by UNICEF in New York to write AIDS education plays, because when AIDS was spreading, they needed to educate children about AIDS. And my play on AIDS was performed as part of the National Drama Festival in 1991. And I wrote another one called Sweet and Sour, more for the adults in London, those who are in London and they have AIDS. So my plays have been educational, dealing with teenage pregnancy, the AIDS epidemic, and so on.
Yeah. Okay, well, you know, we're running near to the end of here, but I want to also ask you, you know, what are some of your plans for programs here in Central Florida after Leesburg?
Okay, I have, the first one is this program in the Leesburg Public Library, coming up April 6th. It's a Saturday at 10 o'clock. The second one is for people who teach in elementary and preschool institutions. There is a big conference coming up at the College of Central Florida. And that is part of a conference. People who are teachers are going to be gathered, and I'm going to run workshops for them. That's at the very end of April. I believe it's the 30th of April.
Okay, and we only have a little, like about 2 minutes, a little over 2 minutes left. So why don't you, is there anything you'd like to show us? Any final thoughts?
I think what I would like to share is that we need to change the curriculum so that we teach Africa as it is today. I mean, there are so many resources. Henry Louis Gates has done a lot of documentaries on Africa. There is a documentary called The Africans. That is good. He's gone around Africa documenting, and some of his PBS films. We've got books. We've got a lot more resources than people can even imagine. So we need to move away from this curriculum that takes Africa as a jungle,
Okay.
and with small houses and so on, and show people Africa as it is today.
Well, I think that'll be perfect. So just remember, everyone, Dr. Masembe will be presenting her program on Saturday, April 6th at the library. It's at 10 a.m. It's for all ages. You know, everybody come on down, and we hope to see you there. Thank you very much, Doctor.
Thank you very much.